Welcome back to another Kray video. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel so you don't miss any videos. And for people really interested in the Krays, check out our private Facebook group, Krays Crime Lords of London. A direct link for the group is in the YouTube description section. We're a friendly and moderated group which has been running since January 2018, and we have over 19,000 members. Come and give us a try sometime.
I had always intended to kill George Cornell. I had to. It was as simple as that. Dixon drove me and Ian Barry to the Beggars in one of the firm's cars, a Ford Cortina. When we arrived, I told him to wait outside while me and Ian Barry went inside to see if Cornell was there. We went into the saloon bar and he was there all right, talking to two other fellas. He was sat on a stool, drinking a glass of light ale. There was a record on the jukebox, which was very popular at the time, called The Sun Ain't Gonna Shine Anymore, by an American singing duo called the Walker Brothers. As we walked in, Cornell looked up and said, in that sneering way he had, "Well, look who's here." I took a 9mm Mauser pistol out of my pocket, and Ian Barry took out a .32 revolver. I was quite calm. Cornell was still sneering. I shot him. The bullet went into his forehead, just above his right eye. It went straight through his head. He fell off his stool. He just fell forward, and I knew he was dead. I see blood come on his forehead, and he just fell forward. I knew he was dead, and I was pleased. They said in court that Ian Barry fired a couple of shots into the ceiling. I don't know about that, I can't remember. I do remember that the needle on the jukebox got stuck on the record, and it kept on repeating the words, "The sun ain't gonna shine anymore, anymore, anymore." Nothing was said. Cornell's pals had disappeared. There was no sign of the barmaid. Me and Ian Barry just walked out of the pub, got in the car, and Dixon drove us back to the Lion. I had a chat with Reg. I knew I had to get rid of my clothes and the gun and have a good scrub. So we went to the Checkers at Walthamstow, which was about 6 miles from the Lion. This was one of the places where we kept a change of clothing. We went upstairs to listen to the BBC News on the landlord's radio. We had a few drinks and eventually it came on the radio. The announcer said something like, "A man has been shot in an East End public house." He was later identified as Mr. George Cornell of Camberwell Green. After the shooting, he was taken to the Maida Vale Hospital, but died some hours later. Like I said, I was pleased. He was scum. I have never had one regret about killing Cornell. I was sorry for his family, of course I was, but if it hadn't been Cornell, it would have been me. I had kept my word. I always keep my word. I knew there had been witnesses in the Beggars, but someone had a word with the people who had been there, including the barmaid and an old fellow who'd been in the public bar. See, if we'd really been the bad bastards some people have said we are, then we'd have made sure that barmaid kept her mouth permanently shut. That's what Cornell would have done. But I can honestly say we were never like that. We never hurt women or children, and the only men we hurt were those stupid enough to get in our way. A few days after I killed Cornell, we were at a party at a flat in Lee Bridge Road in Leighton when the police came barging in and arrested us. We'd been expecting them, of course. In fact, we were surprised it had taken them so long. Chief Inspector Tommy Butler, the head of Scotland Yard's flying squad, was in charge of them. Butler was the man who later tracked down the great train robbers. Me and Reg was put in an identity parade and we saw the blonde barmaid from the Beggars walking towards us. But she walked straight by and never picked us out. Tommy Butler was well pissed off. Like I say, I always intended to kill George Cornell, But the killing of Jack McVitie was different. Sure, we killed him and we got done for it, but there was never like a definite plan to kill McVitie. It just sort of happened. Reggie should never have been done for the murder of McVitie. It should have been self-defense, and I'll tell you why. McVitie's real name was John, but everyone called him Jack. He was known as Jack the Hat because he always wore a hat to hide his bald head. He was very vain about his appearance, and no one ever saw him without his hat. He wore it if he came to the front door to answer it. They say he even wore it in the bath. He wasn't on our firm, but he used to do odd jobs for us. He was quite tough. He had very big forearms, and he liked to think he was a hard man. His big problem was he liked to drink a lot, but he couldn't hold his drink. He got nasty. McVitie started to let us down. He went into the 211 Club in Balham High Road, which was owned by our friend Freddie Foreman. McVitie was drunk, so Freddie told him to leave. He did, but then he came back again, and he caused a scene and did some damage. It was silly. He upset another friend of ours, Ron Olives, in a club called the Log Cabin in Wardour Street, which the boxer Billy Walker had an interest in with his brother George. Then he misbehaved himself in our club, the Regency. He took a gun out and fired a couple of shots at a fella called Tommy Flanagan. Thank Christ he missed. Then he cut a fella with a knife in the basement, walked upstairs and wiped off the blood on his knife on the dress of a woman who was having a drink at the bar. We weren't looking for trouble with McVitie, but he never listened when you gave him advice. He did us out of some money, and then he went down the Regency Club and threatened John Barry with a gun. Barry had an interest in the club with us. That was in October 1967. McVitie was waving a shotgun around, a sawn-off shotgun, and saying things about me, making threats. Reggie talked to him about it in a Chinese restaurant, but McVitie never paid any attention. He was silly. That turned out to be his last supper. Me and Reg spoke about it, and we decided we would sort McVitie out. We set up a little drinks party at a flat in Evering Road in Stoke Newington. It belonged to a friend of ours. Everybody called her Blonde Carol. That was on the night of the 28th. Me and Reg was there, with the Lambrianas, Chris and Tony, and Ron Bender, who was on the firm. There was a couple of other fellas there, young friends of mine. We'd had a few drinks, gin and tonic, and we got a call telling us that McVitie had turned up again at the Regency. I told Tony Lambriano to go and fetch him. Tell him there was a party on, there was some drinks and some women. We knew Jack would come. I knew Reggie had a gun with him, but you had to have a weapon with you if you were going to get involved with someone like McVitie. Everyone knew that McVitie was going to get a beating. Reggie wasn't the only one who was tooled up. Anyway, eventually, Tony Lambriano turns up with McVitie, but there was two other men as well, friends of McVitie. They were two brothers, Ray and Alan Mills. Ronnie Hart, our cousin, had come as well. McVitie was surprised to see us, and we told him to sit in a chair. We told the Mills brothers to bugger off and forget what they had seen. Reggie said to McVitie, "We warned you more than once about causing trouble for us, but you never listened. I told you about the trouble you had at Fred's club, the 211. Then Jack did a silly thing. He said to Reg, 'Fred's club has got nothing to do with you.' That made Reggie mad. He took out his gun, a Beretta, and tried to shoot McVitie. He pulled the trigger, there was a click, but the gun never fired. It was jammed. Then Reg got hold of a carving knife and he'd done him with the knife. Reggie did him 3 times with the knife, twice in his body and once in his face. All that stuff about McVitie running across the room and trying to dive through a window, all that is rubbish. There wasn't time. It happened too quick. It always does. McVitie was on the floor. There was a lot of blood. Ron Bender bent down, listened to his heart and said, "He's dead." That's what happened. All the grasses later sang like canaries in court to save their own skins. Those rats, the Mills brothers, they grassed us, and they weren't even there. McVitie deserved it. He was a bad man. He once broke a woman's back by throwing her out of a car. We had to deal with him. He'd been telling other people he was going to shoot Reggie. They've never found Jack the Hat's body. People like Tony Lambriano may say they know how we got rid of him, but they don't. Only me and Reggie know, but we won't tell. We never grass, we never have. But believe me, just like Cornell, Jack McVitie wasn't a nice man. Even Lambriano wrote in a newspaper, he, McVitie, wasn't the meek little man portrayed in the film, The Krays. He was a known heavy man, an active robber, capable of anything. If Jack the Hat was going to die, that is how he would have wanted to go. Reggie didn't do society such a bad turn. We only handed out punishment when it was deserved. One fella called me a fat slob, so I had to do him. We were in a pub at the time, so I went to the toilet and told someone to pass a message to him that I wanted a quiet word in private. As he came into the toilet, I slashed him with a knife. He had to have plastic surgery. Another time, a man came to see me, a man who was straight, who had no criminal connections, but who knew that the Krays could help him where the police weren't bothered. And he told me that a fella from Mile End had broken his daughter's nose in 3 places because she wouldn't have sex with him. The police didn't want to know. One of them told this man that his daughter was probably just a prick teaser. Nice, eh? Just the sort of thing you want to hear if your daughter has been marked for life by some tearaway. Anyway, we knew of this fella that the man was complaining about because we knew he had also broken the jaw of a 17-year-old boy in another unprovoked attack. It was time something was done about him before he started getting ideas above his station. So I phoned this fella up and told him I wanted to meet him at Esmeralda's barn. He fell for it. He thought because it was me calling him, he was going to be given a job to earn himself some money. But he was a dirty little rat, so I thought I'd set an example with him for the whole East End. And I did. I taught him the lesson he would never forget with the hot poker. If he's alive today, then he'll still have the scars. We've both been violent in our time, me and Reg, but neither of us ever actually enjoyed the violence. It's just like soldiers in the war, the SAS and all that. They're not violent people in themselves really, but it's a job and they have to do it. We were the same. In the film The Krays, they said we could get anything by fear, but we never said that. On the front cover of the video of the film, it says, "If people are afraid of you, you can do anything. Remember that." But we didn't operate like that. We used respect, not fear. There is a big difference. If people respect you, they will do what you ask. If they are frightened of you, they will simply run away and hide from you. People like Cornell and McVitie tried to rule people with fear. If you don't believe me, get hold of a book by Sir Joseph Simpson, the Home Office pathologist, who writes about Cornell and Jack the Hat and says they won't be missed, and they was horrible people. We understood about people like them, and we dealt with them, but what we could never understand was fellas like Ronnie Hart, our own cousin. Me and Reg had been really good to him, given him the good life, and yet, to save his own skin, he told Nipper Reed everything he wanted to hear. He even made a statement implicating the 2 totally innocent friends of mine. who had been at Blonde Carol's flat on the night Jack McVitie got it. Those two young fellas had to stand up to some very harsh police interrogation, but they refused to make statements. They acted like real men, and I was very sorry when one of them later took an overdose of drugs and died. I still feel Ronnie Hart acted very badly. I hope his family and friends realise what a little rat he is. John Dixon was another. Dixon used to drive Reggie around. We gave him a job on the firm when he came down from Scotland. He was skint till we gave him a chance. But he's another one who was willing to drop us in the shit just so's he would come up smelling of roses. And the snivelling little bastard has even cashed in and wrote a book about us. He says in his book that after the disappearance of the Mad Axeman Frank Mitchell, he stayed with me at my flat in Cedra Court. He wrote I eventually dozed off. I was awakened by the smell of gas. The gas fire in my room had been left with the gas switch open. I got up and turned it off. I didn't sleep after that. My mind was working overtime. Did Ronnie come in and turn it on, or did I accidentally turn it on? I never found the answer to that one. But if I had really wanted to kill him, I would have done so straight out, and they would never have found his body in a million years. For those who don't know it, let me tell you the story of one of the gamest men who ever worked in the underworld. Frank Mitchell came from a large poor family in Canning Town. He was a simple man, but a good man, and he was the biggest, strongest man I ever saw in my life. Right from an early age, he was in and out of prisons and mental hospitals, and they all tried and failed to break him. He was birched, given the cat-o'-nine tails, even beaten to a pulp while he was strapped in a straitjacket, but they never broke him. He escaped from Rampton and he escaped from Broadmoor by using the springs of his bed and turning them into a sort of key. When he was out, he got into the house of a couple living nearby, and he nearly frightened them to death by making them sit and have a cup of tea and watch the television with him. The problem was he had an axe balanced on his knee at the time. That was how he got the name, the Mad Axeman. But he wasn't mad, Frank wasn't, and he wouldn't have hurt that couple. He only hurt people who got in his way, especially screws in prison. Finally, they sent him to Dartmoor in Devon, which at the time they said was a prison that no one would ever escape from. Frank was there for 9 years, and the staff left him alone to do more or less what he wanted. They realised it was safer from their point of view because he could be a bit dangerous if he got angry. He had a hell of a life inside Dartmoor. When it all came out in court later, no one could believe it. Even the judge said, "It all sounds like cloud cuckoo land to me." Frank and his best friend in Dartmoor, another convict called Frank Benson, would wander in and out of the prison more or less as they wanted. They used to go riding on ponies across the moor. Sometimes they would ride motorbikes they kept hidden near the prison, and sometimes they would go drinking in pubs on the moor. Frank even used to have sex with a local woman in a barn. As long as the two Franks were back inside their cells by lights out, none of the screws seemed to worry. Dartmoor was a joke. Once my brother Reg disguised himself, used a false name, and went to visit Frank at the prison with the former boxer, Ted Kid Lewis, to show some boxing films, while Ted talked about his career to the cons. Reg even had dinner with the governor after the event. Eventually, Frank got fed up with Dartmoor and upset because the authorities wouldn't review his case. He asked us to get him away from the prison, so we did. On the 12th of December 1966, we had him picked up by a car near the prison. He calmly walked away from a small work party on the moors Mitchell asked the Soul Guard for permission to feed some nearby Dartmoor ponies. His request was granted. He walked over to a quiet road where a getaway car containing Albert Donahue, Teddy Smith and Billy Exley was waiting for him, and they drove to London, where we had a flat all ready for him in Barking Road in East Ham, owned by a friend of ours called Lenny Dunn. It was over 5 hours before Mitchell was reported missing. Frank needed company, so some fellas in the firm used to take it in turns to sit with him and chat to him. Mainly it was Scotch Jack Dixon, a fella called Billy Exley, and Mad Teddy Smith. Smith wrote a letter for Frank Mitchell to the Home Secretary asking that his case should be investigated and his request for freedom should be considered. We sent copies of the letter to the Daily Mirror and the Times. We never got a reply from the Home Secretary. Frank started to get restless and we didn't know what to do with him. We couldn't really pack him off back to Dartmoor, could we? Everyone knows the rest of the story. We had no choice. Frank had threatened our family and friends, and his crazy actions would have led the police right to us. So we did what we had to do, and we had him eliminated. At our trial, Albert Donahue told the court that it took 11 or 12 bullets to kill Mitchell. Fred Foreman and Alfred Gerard did the deed in the back of a Thames van, as Freddie himself has previously admitted in one of the TV documentaries. And that ends part 6. Thanks for watching. I'll see you again in the next one.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please join our Facebook group. It's called Krays Crime Lords of London. We're a friendly moderated group with over 1,000 Kray and other celebrated gangster videos available for view. There's also thousands of images in the photos sections. The link for the group is in the YouTube description section. I hope we see you there soon.
Leave a like and subscribe.